Big one today, guys. So today I'm going to run through the Google algorithm leak that was initially first produced by Rand Fishkin of Spartaro, of course, and then also published by Mike King of iPullRank. Been really fascinating sort of last day or so, right? There were 14,000 different attributes across sort of 2,500 different modules. Today, I'm going to focus on 23 of those attributes that I think are worth your attention. A bit of promo for Session Media. We're a B2B performance marketing agency and have helped hundreds of clients from all over the globe generate millions in pipeline from SEO, Google Ads, and LinkedIn. You can see a glimpse into what we've done to achieve that over the years in the case study section on our website. If you're a B2B business and keen to have similar successes, then send a message via the contact form on the site or drop me a DM on Twitter. Okay, let's get into it. So the Google algorithm leak, as I mentioned, I'm going to go through 23 attributes that I think are worth knowing. Look, I think this is actually a great thing for the community. And I will run through a couple of caveats before I go through this, but at a high level, it's good discussions that, you know, whether you're a white hat, a gray hat, a blue hat, a black hat, whatever hat you wear, having documentation such as this, having a couple of guys objectively put it apart, produce some results out of it and kind of give their thoughts behind it, I think is great for the industry. I think it's going to grow the industry and hopefully move it forward in the right direction. So as I said, look, big up Rand, big up Mike for doing this. This is a great thing. So there are some 2,596 modules that were in the API documentation link. And within that, there was over 14,000 different attributes. Now, if you actually jump onto iPullRank, you can download an Excel sheet of every single attribute, giving you freedom to go through this yourself. Now, I'm not a super techie guy, and I just want to know what the important stuff is, right? So I'm going to go through what I think is the most important sort of findings from this. And there are 23 of those, in my opinion. Now, a few really important caveats. And yes, I'm going to get the pen out for this one as well. We can't 100% confidently say that these are all ranking factors. I must absolutely say that, right? Google might be using this for document storage purposes. It might be used for learning purposes. We don't know for certain if all of these are being used. If they are ranking signals, big if, there's no sort of weighted scoring behind either of these. And we know really for a fact that these aren't all going to be equally weighted, right? So we're going to go through a number of factors here in no particular order, to be totally honest with you. But some will be more important than others, but there's nothing explicitly saying what those factors are. So I just want to kind of chuck that into this, right? I still think this is super useful, even though Google probably will come out and be like, hey, you know, this is learning stuff. You guys don't need to know about this. I think it's important that we go through it and ultimately for you to make up your own decisions on it as well. You know, that's really important. Number one, and it will come to no surprise to anyone that's worked in SEO for any length of time, that site authority is a thing. So we'd seen in the past that some Google spokespeople have said that they don't really have a domain rating as such. They don't have a scoring such as that. Well, actually the leaked documentation reveals otherwise. And they do have a feature called site authority, which is essentially used in their ranking system. So how site authority is calculated isn't necessarily specified. Again, this is something we already knew. We know big publishers rank incredibly well over smaller publishers. We'll come onto it in a little bit more detail on some of the other factors, but we know that some of them can rank for more or less anything. Clearly, that is site authority that is trumping a lot of other signals for that, right? So number two, clicks from search impact ranking. I've done a video on this more recently. The DOJ court case last year did reveal that clicks from search do have an impact on ranking. What I find interesting about this is that it may have more of an impact than maybe we were led to believe. Now, we've run a couple of very small tests on this with the agency. We know for a fact that CTR does have an impact somewhere, but we're also doing CTR with other signals such as link building content. So explicitly how impactful this signal is, it can be hard to tell, especially when you're testing SEO, right? Unless you do this in isolation. So I'm going to go down the various factors that are mentioned within this documentation. And as always, let me know what you think in the comments. Good clicks, so clicks that lead to a satisfactory user experience and likely relevance of the result to the query. Bad clicks, so clicks that lead to a quick back button press indicating irrelevance or poor user experience. Last longest click, the result that receives the most engagement, so the longest click during a search session. Unsquashed slash squashed clicks, so raw click counts versus normalized click counts. The nav boost system, so this specifically uses these click signals for re-ranking purposes. So we know nav boost's been around since 2005, and it was recently updated to look at sort of 13 months worth of click data. Of course, this contradicts Google's public claims that have always said, well, they've sort of said that CTR isn't a ranking factor, which, okay, fine, but clicks from a search result page is kind of the same thing, right? I've added some definitions for squash versus unsquashed. So as mentioned, unsquashed, these are the raw, unaltered click counts for a search query. So a page receives 1,000 clicks for a query. Its unsquashed click count is 1,000. Squash, to prevent a single page or site from dominating the click-based ranking signals, Google applies squashing. This essentially uses a system to work out a weighted sort of rank per click, basically. I think that's how I understand it. Correct me if I'm wrong, that's absolutely fine. With the goal essentially of, if we've only got a small number of data points, we don't want a couple of clicks essentially being the dominating signal in that page's ranking. That's how I understand it anyway. And this is what we call sort of click normalization out the other side of this. So it's a common technique in data pre-processing and machine learning. So normalization helps to bring different scales or magnitudes of data into a more balanced and comparable range. As mentioned, they use it to try and prevent manipulation, of course, as well. And as a bit of a summary, Google combines all of the squash and unsquash click data alongside the good clicks, bad clicks, what else we got here, last longest clicks, etc., to build sort of a comprehensive picture of user engagement. And then that's sort of what the signal is. Number 3, not super exciting, but good validation nonetheless that there is actually a sandbox. I don't think this was new to anyone. If you launch a new site, it will typically take a little bit of time before you see it appear in Google search, right? So Google has always denied sort of this quote unquote sandbox, but the documentation actually indicates an attribute called host age that is used to sandbox fresh spam in serving time. So essentially we know that a version of the sandbox does in fact exist. Number 4, another unsurprising point, but an important one nonetheless, right? Google does use Chrome data. Why would it not? The leaked documentation shows site-level measures of views from Chrome are included in page quality scores, site link generation, and this sort of indicates that Chrome data is utilized as well. Number 5, so Google use twiddlers for re-ranking. We have just mentioned NavBoost, which is a twiddler. So twiddlers are re-ranking functions that run after the primary score algorithm to adjust rankings similar to WordPress filters and actions. So many of these sort of boost systems operate as twiddlers. So we mentioned the nav boost. We've got the quality boost, which we hypothesize sort of re-ranks based on page quality scores. I've also got the real-time boost, which likely re-ranks based on freshness or real-time signals. And we'll come on to that in a little bit as well, and the impact that freshness has on ranking. Other twiddlers include freshness twiddler and the web image boost. There's also enough data there to make us believe that Panda actually started as a twiddler, so it was there as a re-ranking signal before it's actually incorporated into the core algorithm. Number 6, the impact of authorship on a page. So the leaked Google documentation reveals that the search engine explicitly stores information about the authors associated with web pages. I know that there had been, and there still is really, and there still will continue to be, quite a lot of conversation as to the impact of listing authors on a website versus not listing. I believe, or my 2 cents on it, that this point number 6 here actually shows that having an author plastered all over your site does impact your rankings positively. But I do also believe, and again, we'll come on to this in a couple of points' time, that has to match the off-page sort of authorship signals that Google is also seeing as well. So you can't really do the on-page without the off-page, but you could probably do the off-page without the on-page, I would believe anyway. Again, we don't know the weighted scoring system of each of these points, which is another key thing to remember as we go through this. But it was interesting that authors on-page is a factor nonetheless. So let's dive into this in a little bit more detail. So here's a few points about how Google uses author information. So author attribution. So Google extracts and stores the names of authors associated with articles and blog posts. So this information is likely sourced from page guidelines, structured data markup, schema, or other on-page signals. Entity recognition. So the documentation suggests that Google employs named entity recognition techniques to identify whether an entity mentioned on a page is also the author of the page. So this helps the search engine establish a connection between the content and the creator, basically. EAT considerations. So interestingly, it's not explicitly mentioned in the leaked documentation, but author information likely plays a key role in Google's evaluation of EAT or EEAT now. So by understanding who created a piece of content, Google can better assess its credibility and authority, especially for the YM/YL industry. Author reputation. So although the specifics are not detailed in a link, it's plausible. And again, this is a bit of a hypothesis that Google uses author information to build a reputation score for individual content creators. This score could be based on factors such as quality and performance of an author's past work, their expertise in specific topics, and their overall sort of online presence. So this is kind of tying the off-page sort of author signals with what's said on the on-page as well. And a little bit on sort of rank brain and machine learning. So Google's rank brain algorithm, which we know uses machine learning to understand search queries and web page content, will likely incorporate author information as an input. So by analyzing patterns and relationships between authors and topics and content performance, RankBrain can potentially make more informed ranking decisions, right? There's a few actions that I've listed here. So I think the key thing is just making sure that there's consistency with the author on page and any author's sort of off page as well. I think having the two work in tandem is where you're going to get the best net outcome with this as well. Obviously trying to build sort of reputation outside of your site. So getting featured in Red Top Press, authoring a book, being on podcasts, everything that sort of happens outside of Google that has your author footprint is going to help build the reputation score, quote unquote, of the website that author also sits on. I think is a bit of a summary. So number 7, we're looking at demotions. So what things can actually derank you, or kick your rankings to the curb, so I've so eloquently put here. So I put a handful, so Panda. So this is obviously a demotion based on low quality content. As mentioned, this was initially rolled out as a twiddler, so it was a re-ranking sort of function. Anchor mismatch, so demotion for irrelevant anchors compared to the target page. I look at this, and an easy example is if you've got learn more listed all over your site pointing to various pages, terrible anchor. Use the title of the page as the first anchor, I think is a simple fix for that. SERP demotion, so demotion based on signals of user dissatisfaction with a result. So those would be some of those click signals mentioned above. Nav demotion, likely a demotion for poor navigation or UX issues. Exact match domains, this has been published in Google's more recent documentation around sort of the exact match domain sort of spam. Now we know for a fact that this does still work, still works today. Tested this as recently as 2 months ago. Hit page 1 for an EMD for a keyword that has search volume. So we know for a fact this still works. But again, all of these are going to be different sort of weighted signals, right? So just because I've tested and it works doesn't mean it's always going to work. And again, I know that there's been anecdotal evidence that EMDs in some cases have been kicked. Product reviews, so demotion possibly related to unhelpful product review pages, and certain page types can be demoted as well. So number 8, links are tiered in importance. Now, despite Google sort of devaluing or saying that they devalue the importance of links by saying they're not in the top 3 considerations, we know, and we always have known, that this hasn't been the case, and we don't believe it's going to be the case ever, because it's the crux of what their algorithm is built on, right? So What's interesting with this is the tiering system of which they score link impacts, right? So indexing tier of linking page impacts the link value. So e.g. the links from fresh, regularly updated pages actually pass more value. So what I'm going to do is go through high level some of these impacts and then go through this in a bit more detail. Spam link velocity. This is the rate of suspected spam links pointing to a page over time. Homepage page rank and trust. Comments this as a separate factor, but essentially this is used as a link-based signal inherited by all pages on the site. Font size of anchor text, which I thought was quite interesting. So essentially how big the font is of the linking text going to the preceding page can impact sort of the weight of that link. And I guess there's sort of a small sort of important signal that sits there somewhere. Sort of a part two to this. So according to the link Google documentation, source type is a metric that indicates a relationship between the indexing tier of a page and its perceived value or importance. So let's look at this in a bit more detail. So Google's index actually divided into 3 tiers. So the most important, frequently updated and accessed content is stored in fast flash memory, FFD. Less important content is stored on solid state drives, SSDs. The least important and infrequently accessed content is stored on standard hard disk drives, so HDDs. So the source type metric suggests that the higher the indexing tier of a page that the page is in, the more value or important its outgoing links are considered to be. So in other words, a link from a page stored in tier 1 flash memory is likely to pause more value or link X tier page rank than a link from a page in tier 3, an HDD. So additionally, pages are considered fresh, recently published or updated, are also regarded as high quality sources, irrespective of their indexing tier. So this implies that links from recently updated pages, especially those in news or rapidly evolving verticals, can be particularly valuable for SEO. And I think breaking this all down, whereas there had been a lot of perception that maybe a niche edit can pass more value than a guest post, broadly speaking, right? Actually, this kind of shows that if you have a new page that goes onto a high authority site and you get a link from that probably will count, or that would generate more page rank than maybe the aged page that is ranking, you get a niche edit on it. What I think is also important here is that if you do go for a niche edit or you go for a link from a maybe on a new website, make sure that website is appearing in Google search, right? Make sure it's ranking for relevant keywords, because that indicates that there is some importance to that page. Otherwise Google wouldn't rank it top, right? So good ones to bear in mind. Strategically, this information reinforces the importance of securing links from high quality, regularly updated pages that are likely to be classified in the top indexing tier. But it also emphasizes the value of digital PR and obtaining links from authoritative news sources, which are more likely to be fresh and stored in fast memory. So number 9, this one's really interesting. Google analyzes the last 20 versions of your page. So when analyzing a particular page, Google will only use the last 20 versions / changes of that URL, even though all versions of that page have been stored indefinitely, right? So this gives a bit of an idea as to how many content changes are needed for a potential sort of clean slate on a URL. So there might be a hypothesis there that if you suffered a deranking from an update of such, then potentially changing your page 21 times might actually give it a clean slate and almost like a reconsideration for recovering those rankings, right? Now, again, we don't know the crux of what is kind of deemed as a change, or what needs to be done to be significant enough to be sort of deemed as one of these versions, right? It could be we change one word 20 times in the article, and then on the 21st time it's going to be given a bit of a rewrite. But I find this fascinating. This is definitely something that we're going to test across one of our other test sites that was kicked earlier on this year. And why 20? It's crazy. Number 10, homepage page rank is a global factor. We just touched on this recently, but essentially every document has the page rank of its homepage, or the nearest seed version of it associated with it. This is likely used as a proxy for new pages until they attain their own page rank. I think we had seen some of this more recently with the likes of Parasite SEO, with pages that have plenty of strong brand signals that have always ranked well, good site authority, what have you, are always more likely to rank than pages that don't have those sort of strong signals to begin with. Makes perfect sense. I think, again, this is something that we already knew, but good validation for us nonetheless. Number 11, font size matters. Bit of an interesting one. Again, this isn't new information, and I haven't seen any evidence to suggest that a page is ranked solely on the basis of font size, but worth a test, especially if you're building your internal link structure across your site. Maybe make some of those anchors slightly different compared to the other text. What are the outcomes of it? That'd be the best way to assess the importance of this. Number 12, and staying on the concept of internal links. So in the documentation, there is mention of the Penguin algorithm, which has been designed to identify and penalize, not just sort of derank, but actually penalize websites that engage in manipulative link schemes or have an unnatural backlink profile. So one of the interesting revelations from the documents is that Penguin also seems to discount or ignore some internal links within a website. So the specific feature mentioned is dropped local anchor count, which suggests that Penguin is capable of detecting and dropping certain internal links, referred to as local links, from its link graph calculations. So some key points below. So local links, in this context, local link refers to an internal link within a website as opposed to an external link coming from other domains, just so we're absolutely clear. Dropped anchor. So this sort of implies that Penguin identifies and drops specific internal link anchors from its calculations. Could be based on various factors such as anchor text used, context of the link, or relevance of the linked page. Unnatural internal linking. So Penguin's ability to drop internal links suggests that the algorithm is not only concerned with external link manipulation, but also with unnatural spammy internal linking practices. Now, this is the first time I've ever seen of anything like this. And I think when you build a site, you always hear the sound bites of no one's ever been done by over-optimizing internal links, right? And I do believe that that is true, but we can see that Google will essentially give up or discount the value of the internal links if they're keyword rich, if they're not relevant to the certain page that they're pointing to, among other factors. So if you've got this whole site, if you've got the same, or let's say you have a 100-page site, I don't know, you have one sort of key service page. If every single page is pointing to that service page with the same keyword rich anchor, it's likely that Google is going to discount the value of that internal link. So I think this sort of emphasizes the importance of building internal link silos. It's important that anchor text is varied and is relevant to the content, but also to the page. Sort of the standard sort of SEO stuff that we would do for an off-page sort of plan, maybe consider that on page as well. Number 13, no mention of disavow. Been a little bit of chatter about this more recently in Google potentially retiring the disavow tool. No evidence to suggest that disavow actually does impact anything on the site. I'm not too sure what to make of this. We don't do a great deal of disavows anymore. We've run a couple of disavow projects maybe in 2016 when we were doing a bit of a link tidy up on a site. We got a bit of a lift from it, but again, we were doing other things at the same time, so I can't explicitly say that factor actually carried any weight. But interesting, you make your own decisions on what you think of this. Number 14, so not all your content on a page will be seen. I was actually delighted to see this and the next point that I think is coming up. We take on so many clients from agencies that sort of say to us, our last agency said we need a minimum word count of 1,000. I've always said no. Number of words that are required should be tied to the search query, and that's what we base it on, right? So interestingly, Google will actually provide a maximum number of indexable content tokens per document, right? So the ratio of total words to unique tokens is also calculated. So a few key points here. There's a token limit. So Google has predefined an upper limit on the number of tokens it will consider when analyzing a web page's content. That means if the page actually exceeds it, then essentially it will be truncated, right? Google might not actually even bother crawling it. There's a word to token ratio. So in addition to the raw token count, Google will also compute the ratio of total words unique tokens on a page. So the ratio could be used to assess sort of content quality, as a high proportion of unique tokens may indicate more information or diverse content. So content quality goes up, number of tokens goes up, the likeliness to crawl the page increases. And I do think that this could be site-wide as well. If Google looks at some of the early piece of content on your site, quote unquote, is deemed as good quality, they're more likely to crawl more of your content more often, right? I think that makes sense. So a couple of things to take out of this. Importance of content placement. Spoken quite a lot about this recently. So it's important to get the important stuff at the top of the content, the key takeaways, the authorship, everything sort of as early as possible, so we know for a fact that it's going to be crawled. Long form content, whether it's short or long, I don't think it matters. Answer the query succinctly, provide enough information that the user has everything they need, and maybe point them to additional resources. And not neglecting sort of content structure as well. So breaking it up into smaller, more focused sections, clear headings, et cetera, is all going to be to the benefit of Google and of course to the benefit of your user. That's what you want. Number 15, and tied to this, short content is actually scored on originality. So essentially, this gives a bit of validation that thin content, quote unquote, isn't actually about word count. And there's also a keyword stuffing score to detect spammy usage of the same keyword, right? So really good point here. Thin content is not just about length. So the leaked documents actually indicate that thin content isn't on word count. A page with low word count but highly original content may score better than a lengthy page with mostly duplicated or unoriginal content. Unique value proposition. So the original content score underscores the importance of creating content that has like a unique perspective or some kind of value to the user. And I think between these, this is really important because we don't need to write so much content around a particular subject area if it doesn't need it. Be concise, get to the point, add as much or as little depth as required, and then point them out to external resources, and you should be in the clear. Number 16, so page titles matching the query. So I found this quite interesting as well. How well the page title matches the query is still valued according to the title match score. I would have thought by now that sort of page titles would have been largely sort of retired. Obviously not. If you have a query in the page title and that is tied to the page content, that is going to score very well. Is the crux of it. Number 17, listing published and updated dates actually important. And admittedly, this is something that I neglected. I did not believe that there was a huge amount of value in listing a published and updated date. Again, taking into account the caveats that maybe it isn't, but there's leaked documentation suggesting otherwise. So Google attempts to associate dates with pages in various ways. So a byline date, so the explicit date listed on the page, the syntactic dates, so dates extracted from URLs or titles, and the semantic dates. So an example I've actually put here is if a page mentions like a specific event on a known date, then Google may associate that date with the page, even if it's not explicitly stated. So I think key learnings to take out of this, list your published date and list your updated date. We already know that Google values content freshness as well, so the updated date part of that is going to be really critical moving forward. Number 18, and we're nearly at the end of this. So domain registration, the latest domain registration info, so the registrar, the dates, etc., is stored on a per document level, and it's likely used for sandboxing new content and assessing sort of site ownership changes per the recently introduced expired domain spam policy. Video focus sites. So any sites with over 50% of the page containing video, they'll be treated slightly differently, which also kind of makes sense. If you posted a video on a web page, you don't necessarily need to transcribe the whole thing. Google will actually treat that page slightly differently. 20, YMYL. Again, I think we kind of knew this. They have their own sort of separate scoring system because of the impacts on money, health, and life. 21, so this gold standard documents is interesting. So human labeled gold standard documents are mentioned as contrasted with algorithmically labeled annotations, but the specifics of how these gold standard docs are used are not clear. So they may be used for machine learning or quality evaluation. We actually know during COVID that Google whitelisted certain sites that they would promote, for a lack of a better word, when they were publishing sort of COVID health guidance, for example. So this could be tied into something like that. We're not sure. Number 22, and actually I think this is one of the most important ones. So topical relevance across the site is important. So stick with me on a little bit with this. I'm going to try and explain this as best I can, or I have done anyway. So site embeddings, which was mentioned in the documentation, refer to the use of neural embeddings or dense vector representations to understand and compare the content of web pages and websites. So I think some key points about site embeddings. There's page and a site embedding. So Google creates neural embeddings for individual web pages, the page embeddings, and entire websites, the site embeddings. These embeddings capture the semantic meaning and context of the content. So where's this playing to topical relevance? So by comparing the similarity between page embeddings and the overall site embeddings, Google can assess how topically relevant or on topic each page is to the main theme of the website. So this helps the search engine understand the overall focus and coherence of a site's content. And there's a couple of different ways in which Google does this, but I appreciate I'm running over quite a lot. But this, in summary, explains why topical authority is a huge factor on the site. And if you're writing about one thing specifically, staying on topic with that particular sort of site category will set you up better from, I'm speculating here, but from an EEAT perspective within that category than going super broad and not really having that sort of topical relevance, whatever. That's what I'm kind of taking from this. So I put some sort of points to optimize for these site embeddings. So maintain a clear and consistent topical focus across the site. Ensure that most pages are semantically related to the main theme. Use relevant contextual keywords and phrases throughout the site content to reinforce the topical relevance of that page. Structure the website's content hierarchy and internal linking to emphasize the important and most relevant pages. Regularly assess and prune low quality off-topic pages that may dilute the site's overall focus and relevance. I posted a video about this. We did this for a client site where we no-indexed, I think it's around 40 to 50% of the site's pages because they're no relevance to the site's core offering. And we immediately noticed a spike in rankings and traffic. It was almost like a week later. Couldn't believe it. But I knew for a fact that being topically relevant is super important with SEO. Create high quality, comprehensive content that thoroughly covers the topic, as this can help strengthen the semantic relationship between pages and the overall site theme. So topical authority matters, semantically related content matters, do more of that. And lastly, small sites may not stand a chance, unfortunately. So there was an attribute that essentially highlighted a small personal site being potentially demoted or boosted by a twiddler. Although the demotion seems more likely given the recent updates with the helpful content update that have impacted a lot of smaller sites. So of course the criteria for what contributes a small personal site isn't specified, but interestingly and worryingly, I would say, to find that if you own a small personal site, you rely on that as your main source of income, is not going to fill you with much confidence, is it? So as a quick summary, if you stuck with me for this long, thanks so much. I appreciate it's quite a lot to go through, but I think it's really important. There's a lot to take out of that. My sort of 3 underlying thoughts. There's not really a lot in there that we didn't already know. I think a lot of this is just more validation, and they break down more of the specifics, around clicks, links, dates, page quality, topical relevance. Really, really useful, but nothing sort of new to the world, I don't think. From our perspective, it's not actually going to impact our delivery processes too much. Of course, the final point here is signals will contradict one another. So without the context of and the weight of scoring, we don't really know which ones to prioritize above another. But I think, like with all SEO, they're just all factors to consider. Well, it's a long one, so thank you for sticking with me for this amount of time if you have done. I'd welcome your interpretations on all of this as well. Do you interpret some of these attributes different to how I have? If you've liked the video, please drop a like on the video and please subscribe to the channel. Otherwise, I'll see you on the next video. Thank you.